Hi, I'm Mickelle Webber, founder and auteur of House of Peregrine. Expat, immigrant, pioneer, none of these were a fit, but Peregrine describes what we are all about perfectly. Those that craft their life story with intention. I've spent the last 6 years in awe of the life-changing connections and stories I have experienced while living abroad, and believe it is time for this adventure to be recognized, celebrated, and elevated to the life stage that it is. Through these interviews, I hope to connect those living internationally more deeply to both the place they are living and with themselves and those around them. We cover everything from international finances and meaning-making to global parenting and relationships to make your time abroad more intentional, edifying, and full of beauty. Find us at houseofperegrine.com, where you can find more ways to connect with the ethos of Peregrine. I hope you enjoy today's guest. Let's get started. Today, my guest is Mariska van der Meij of Mama Dutch. She helps Dutch learners go from scared to speak to kick-ass confident with online conversation courses. She guides her students to find meaningful language moments within parenting, to feel more settled in their community, at a new school, in the neighborhood, and more by focusing on using Dutch strategically during certain interactions. Mariska grew up in the Netherlands and feels an innate desire to help people feel more at home when they move here. Through her weekly online courses, she provides parents feedback and new ways of integrated language learning into their already busy lives. Mama Dutch is her offering to those who want to learn her language and offers a framework in which parents can feel proud that they have learned a new language and can get around more comfortably in the Dutch language in their daily life with their kids and beyond. Welcome, Mariska. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Okay, first off, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and what your relationship with language is. It's a big question to start off.
Let's go. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I grew up in Diemen, which is a small town just right attached to Amsterdam, our capital city. And I lived there until I was 19 or 20 years old. I moved to Den Haag, The Hague, and then I lived in Amsterdam for about 10 years. I grew up in Amsterdam, which is a big city for the Dutch, the biggest city we have, and it's very international. Yeah, there's so many nationalities living there. So that's my base. That's my basis where I grew up, and then I traveled quite a lot when I was younger. I started my traveling experience when I was 16. I went with a friend to England, and that was very exotic and exciting. We flew to London, and then we took a train up to Scotland, and then down through Wales and back to London again. And that's actually where my desire to learn more about the world and other cultures and languages started. When I was 18, I went to New Zealand and Australia, and I traveled through Singapore, Thailand, and Malaysia. And that was just, wow, that was a really eye-opener for me to discover so many different cultures, languages, food also, because I come from a country where we eat a lot of bread and potatoes, and food doesn't really have a big, like a big role in our lives. It has to be practical and warming. So finding out that there are so many other people in the world who love food much more than we do was very exciting. And then, I studied European studies in the Netherlands, and that's where I met so many other people from all around the world, because it was an international study in The Hague. And I learned French there and Spanish. And I did an international exchange in Japan for 6 months. So I also lived in Japan back then. And now I'm a Dutch teacher.
So
all of a sudden.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is you realized the world was large and then suddenly needed to see it all and learn it all from a young age. I want to go back to what you said, because I think a lot of people wonder about this. At least I did at first and still do. You say that in the Netherlands, food isn't did you say it wasn't as important or wasn't as something? Tell me what you think about that.
Yeah. We're very practical, praktisch. We're very practical. So everything has to like fit into our lives without much fuzz. So Dutch food is just basically the traditional Dutch food is potatoes, vegetables, and then a lot of meat. Obviously, we also have evolved, but still, yeah, it doesn't really play a big role. Like I have a lot of students. We talk about food always in my courses, and I have a lot of students who say like, food is the most important thing when you have guests over. Like food is the main part of the visit. And for the Dutch, it's just like, here, have a cookie and a cup of tea, and then we can just chat and talk a little bit. It's not it doesn't really play a big role. So that's what I meant by that.
No, but I love to hear you talk about it because I think it does confound a lot of people when they move here from all over the world, many places.
Yeah.
But and again, this isn't part of your course, but I'll just quiz you a little bit if you don't mind. I didn't realize that inviting someone over for dinner is kind of a bigger deal than maybe other places. Where I grew up, because someone coming over for dinner wasn't a big thing. It was more the merrier. Come to the table, 10 people, 3 people, doesn't matter. And that's not the same here. So tell us just quickly about that before we move on.
Yeah, no, of course. I'm curious about your experience also, but what I hear from my students is that, well, what I know from the Dutch is that we like things to be planned ahead. So if you're coming over for dinner, it's planned. Like we make an appointment usually weeks before, and then you come over for dinner. And we're also very practical. I say we, like it's not everyone, but we're very practical in just in having enough food for the amount of people that you expect. So just randomly, spontaneously asking someone to come over is not practical again, because we don't have enough food, or we think we don't have enough food. That's a bit, yeah.
When I think it can be a little surprising, which is why I'm asking you about it, because it's kind of a snub in some cultures to not just have you come in, but it's almost a sign of like respect. You want to have enough. You want to have enough planning. So it's I think it's one of the bigger things I've heard people be surprised about. And then once they hear the explanation, they're like, oh, okay, well, so this is cultural. It's not personal.
Many people feel offended by it. Yeah, and I can imagine if you come from a culture where there's always enough and always space, and where it's even rude not to stay for dinner in some cultures. For the Dutch, it's just like, oh, it's 5. We're gonna be eating soon. You have to go.
No, it's fine. But I think it's really, again, it's comforting. Sometimes it could be personal. Let's not leave that out. But most of the time, I think it's cultural. Thanks for answering my questions. I always feel like I need to be a little bit of an investigator for people who are newly coming, to give them little, insights.
Yeah, but they are very important, because it can really throw people off. Like I've had students who said like, I felt so offended, or I almost cried that they didn't offer me food, or they didn't ask me to join for dinner. So it's important to understand the cultural things, that it's usually it's not personal. Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing your insight about food and etiquette about that, because I think it's really one of those things that makes it easier for people to not take it personally, and therefore helps them feel more at home and at ease, instead of getting caught up by that sort of thing. Okay, I want to ask you about something I always ask my guests about, the moment when they realized they wanted to do something. And I'd love to hear your moment when you knew you wanted to teach others your language after traveling around the world. And so tell us that story, if you would.
Yeah, so it would be amazing if it was 1 point, but it's just all an accumulation of choices, actually. And I did international studies, I did political science, and then I realized that the theory was not for me, and that I didn't also I didn't want to, but I also didn't really have the ability to overlook all these what's the word, complicated things, international things. So I decided to do another studies, which was a Dutch teacher education.
And when you say complicated international things, you don't mean inviting someone over for dinner.
No, exactly. Which is also a complicated international thing, but on a different scale. Yeah. So I started doing the Dutch teacher studies, and I started teaching high school children, which was not for me. So I did that for about 2 years, and then I got burned out and just overwhelmed with the energy of teenagers. And then someone in the studies sitting next to me turned out to have his own language school for grown-ups, for adults in Amsterdam. So he invited me over to just have a look. And he taught me the basics, how to teach language to adults. And I just fell in love with it. I love the energy. I love the vibe of people coming here and just trying to make something up from this weird, beautifully weird language. And I discovered that I have a talent for explaining those complicated rules and the grammar rules and all these exceptions to the rules in a fun and enjoyable way. And that's where just people just started coming to me for lessons, and that's where it all started.
Yeah. What is the difference between teaching children and teaching adults a language? Besides the overwhelming energy of high schoolers, I can understand that. Yeah. What was the key thing that you noticed?
It's a drive and a motivation to give it a go, but also it's very, what's the word? You have to put yourself out there as an adult. Like you have to. Most people that I have.
It's vulnerable. It's vulnerable. Yeah.
Vulnerable. That's the word. Yeah. Because you get to a certain point in your life where like you manage to do it. You have a career. You moved all your stuff abroad to a new country. You sort of have your life together. And then all of a sudden you have to go back to, ik ate an apple. Like I eat an apple. Or the turtle is green, or things like that, while your head is wants to say all these complex sentences. Yeah. And that's very vulnerable. And I really love how people just put themselves out there and try it. Go for it.
Yeah, I think I've told this story before, but when we first moved here, my oldest was 5. And he said, after a few weeks of hearing, I guess, me saying I don't know a lot. I said it one day when we were riding our bike home from school. I said, I don't know, buddy. And he goes, Mom, what do you know?
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, that's a really good point. I don't know much anymore. And so it is vulnerable. I mean, the basics, the good stuff, but like you start over in this new, very vulnerable place. Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah.
Have you ever had someone come to you? How do you lead people to that vulnerability? Say they get stuck in I think in my language learning journey, there's moments when I get stuck. I'm like, I'm tired of being vulnerable all the time. How do you push them out of that?
Well, the good thing and the bad thing about the Netherlands, and especially Amsterdam or the bigger cities, which you probably know of yourself, is that almost everyone speaks English. So it's easy to be here for a couple of years, getting by in English. And I have a lot of people coming into let's take it back, because I started teaching the courses, like the regular courses with a book and getting you from level 1 to 2 to 3, etc. But what I realized is that people weren't speaking in real life, in the wild, I always say. Yeah. So they were studying, they were speaking in my classes, they were answering the questions, they were doing their housework, their homework, but then when it came to real life, they didn't dare to speak to the neighbors or to their family, their in-laws or other Dutchies. So that's when I realized, hey, I want to help people overcome that point, like to take the step to actually start speaking more. So what I say to my students who have this feeling, who get stuck, who are like, I don't want to be vulnerable anymore, or I feel so dumb when I'm speaking in Dutch. I always try to get the joy back, like get them to feel joy again in learning something new and trying something new and laughing about themselves a little bit, about the mistakes they make. And yeah, I always say, like, you fall a little bit or you fall flat on your face by making mistakes, and then you just get up and do it again, because it's super awesome that you're even trying, right?
Yeah. So acknowledging that you're going to do that, first of all, I think is a really good step. And you're going to do it probably a lot, but then what you're doing is actually really hard, and you're going to be proud of yourself later. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And also many people are like, I want to be fluent within a year. And I always say, like, okay, but is it realistic for you? Like, it can be done.
Yeah.
But does it match your other life goals, your other things you want to do, your aspirations in life? And can we also take it step by step and just see, like, in 5 years where you are then, if we take steps towards that goal now?
Yeah, it's a really good point, because I think, and this kind of leads to our next question, I think, is adults, fully formed adults. I think I always say, if I would have moved here when I was 18, I probably would have had more space to learn a language. But coming here with 3 children, it's an excuse, of course, but I try to give myself some slack, because I had less room in my life maybe to learn a language than maybe would have been required. And so putting it as actually something you have to spend time on and have as a goal. It sounds obvious, but I think it's a lot harder to conceive of before you've come to the place. And also, when you can get by in English, it's just, or your native, or even if English is your second language, but Dutch is your third, it can become lower on the priority list really fast.
Yep.
So I want to talk about something really quick with you. Before we get to why parents are maybe we should go to that, because I really like. So tell me how parents became, I know you teach more than just parents, but that's kind of, from what I understand, your passion is to teach parents.
Yeah, I've been teaching conversation courses for about 5 years now, and I just had a lot of women coming into my courses. I don't only aim at target women, but they just find me, and I love it. And I started just to hear their motivation. Usually was like, yeah, my child is almost going to school or is now going to school, and I don't have that excuse, quote unquote, that I can just speak English and not speak Dutch, because when they go to primary school, you have this interaction with the teacher who doesn't always want to speak Dutch, interaction with the other parents, and also you get more Dutch children to your house because your child is going to make friends. And they felt like, yeah, I need to know more Dutch now. So I started building a course around that, that what's the word, that desire, that need.
Yeah, or that transition. It is a big transition, because if you do decide to send your kids to school in a language you don't understand, that's a pretty big, it's a big decision, but also you don't realize how much you are part of that decision, I don't think, especially your first time around, if you've never sent a kid to school before.
Yeah.
And so it's actually an opportunity, another, say you didn't learn Dutch the first year or two, it's another moment of newness to introduce a language with new relationships and all this.
Yeah.
So you saw that mothers and fathers, but a lot of mothers were coming to you saying, oh, I have this moment of where I can start again with maybe new things, or I'm going to need to feel comfortable. Cool. That makes total sense. And how do you get them kind of started in that? What is the frame? Because what I've learned, and Dutch is only my second language and I don't even have it, but what I learned early on is that how you start a relationship is how it continues, usually, whichever language you choose. And so it's really hard, even if you start in English and then you say, oh, I'm learning Dutch, it's really hard for you to change languages mid-relationship, even with like someone who's taking care of your kids at daycare or a teacher. So tell me a little bit about how you frame that for your students.
Yeah, so I always invite them in the beginning to pick one person that is going to be like your Dutch buddy. So the one person that you want to ask and that you feel comfortable with, that you can say like, hey, I really want to switch to Dutch and I need you to help me. Can you help me? And that you just start with one person and not with everyone, so that you can, your whole system, your body will feel more at ease just easing into it with one person. So that's usually step that, what's the word, that will spread, like that will be the
impetus of it. So is that like one of those people would be like one of the people at the school?
Yeah, or another mom, another parent that you feel comfortable with. A teacher could be, yeah, or a child, even a friend of your child that you say like, hey, I'm gonna try with this kid, and just getting into the groove of speaking this new language. Yeah.
In my experience, kids just look at you like, why are you speaking bad Dutch to me?
Yeah. What is your experience with that?
Oh, no. Well, it's interesting because I think I can understand children more than I can understand adults. But what I experienced is that my kids felt embarrassed that I was practicing when they were around. And so that's a whole other, it's not really, I was trying not to use it as an excuse, but it is something that I was trying to be sensitive to with them trying to fit in and then all that. But what I want to ask you about is accents. I noticed you were talking about that a little bit. And I feel like at least the children and the teachers that I've talked to, they get very uncomfortable when I speak with an accent. The teacher said, please don't speak Dutch to your kids because they'll learn it with an accent. And so there was this big focus on me not ruining their Dutch. And I want to hear.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they were like, don't practice with them, speak only in the English with them. And that's actually backed up with research as well, that you have to reinforce their mother tongue, as it's called. But I want to hear how what I've noticed is that maybe there's different accents mean different things, but also there's a lower barrier for people hearing accents maybe. And that's just my theory.
Lower barrier to speak English to you?
Yeah, no. For me to speak Dutch to them. So what everyone says is, oh, I start in Dutch and people just switch when they hear my accent to English.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if that's it's super nice, by the way. It saves all of our bums, but is it that it's hard to hear an accent? Like it's hard to understand the language if there's an accent?
Well, yeah, there's not. Okay, there is a thing that's called ABN, which is like the general Dutch they say with no accent, but I don't really believe that there's no accent. I think there's always an accent.
Yeah.
But there's not many people speaking that. Like we have such a broad variety of accents in the Netherlands, even in our tiny, tiny country. Like if I go to the north, I have a hard time understanding the people from Groningen. And also when I go all the way to the south in Limburg, I just have to try. Sometimes I have no clue what they are saying. They just have a completely different accent and other words. And so that's why I don't really believe in, I don't want to have an accent or that. But it is a fact that when people hear a foreign accent, they are more likely to speak English to you. Yeah.
Which I've always been grateful for. But now I'm beginning to wonder if it's actually just hard for them to understand any, because I feel like Dutch is very specific to the region, like you're saying. And so if you're in that region, it works. But if not, then you just don't know quite know what to do. Whereas I feel like I grew up, if I hear an accent, I can say, and I'm from the US, I will just say, oh, are you from the US? Unless they're British or Canadian, I can tell. I just say, oh, you could be from America. Doesn't matter to me what your accent is. And so I think that was a surprise to me, a little bit about the accent being such a big deal. And that's an important thing for preserving language, and I respect it. But it helped me feel a little bit better about my pronunciation not being perfect and having to say it again, and sticking with people saying, I just say it again in Dutch instead of letting them speak in English.
Yeah, heel goed. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me so you start out with when parents, when their kids start school, find a buddy. That's your first.
Yeah.
What's next?
And then what we do, so I have a course that's called Dutch for Moms. where dads are also welcome, but but we usually have a lot of women. And there, where what it is, it has 3 components. So there's a community part, a learning part, self-study part with a workbook with all the vocab that you can expect per situation. So I'm breaking it down, and I'm making it smaller per situation. So, for example, what words would you need if you go into the what's the word, teacher talk, the conversation about your child? We call it the 10-minute conversation, 10 minuten gesprek. What words, what sentences do you want to use? What questions do you want to ask? And so I give them the words. And then we also have live sessions online where we just practice speaking, and I answer all the questions that are there. So that's the 3 parts. And then I just motivate and inspire you to try, right? To just go for it and give it a go.
Yeah.
In real life.
And I think the bucket of vocab, like that is vocabulary is like a super genius thing, because I think that if you kind of go in with the words in your head, that's a huge thing. But most Dutch courses don't focus on parenting or school. So when I've gone into Dutch courses, I've taken a few, embarrassingly, and I still don't speak very well. But I notice my vocabulary is lacking behind. But once they go over anything with kids, I'm like, oh yeah, I know what that means. And so those clusters of vocabulary are super important, I think, to be able to grasp more. So I think that's super brilliant that you do it around parenting or around children or school. That's really, really, I think.
Yeah, and it's
smart.
so important to be able to find your way in school. Like, it's such an important time in your child's life, but also in your life, because you want to be involved in school. And my oldest daughter is now in primary school for 3 years, and I just realized what this whole new world of parent WhatsApp groups and helping out with school activities and holidays and all these traditions in school. And yeah, just want to give back a little bit to the women that are not from here, that also want to participate.
Yeah, because it really does become your community. Whether if your kid is somewhere, it doesn't matter. And what I've definitely experienced is that in order to feel a part of that community, you do need to at least start learning Dutch, or at least try a little bit of Dutch. And that's not just because of other people's perceptions. It's also because your child is learning that language.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you something. I've heard this about language, that with each language you learn, you explore different parts of your personality, or you have a different personality, a different language.
Yeah.
Tell me your thoughts about this. I always find it so fascinating.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's just words are such a big part of your personality, and the way you speak and the way you feel comfortable speaking. So I have so many students who say to me that most of them feel a little bit boring, like they are a little bit boring for the other people, because you lack the jokes and nuances and those little things in the language that make you who you are. I have it too now. Like, I'm speaking in English, but it's not my first language, and I'm just missing out the nuances of what I want to say. So it can change a bit.
So is your English self more formal and your Dutch self more something? Like, how would you describe those differences? I would love to hear that.
More self-aware of how I'm speaking, how my mouth is moving, because it has to make all these different sounds. I'm aware of my accent also, and try not to worry about my accent, because it's my accent. And I'm just missing, like in Dutch, we use a lot of expressions, like a lot, and that's really makes our language a bit more colorful.
Yeah.
And I have no clue about those in English. So yeah. I would be more self-aware, more thinking about what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah.
And so tell us your favorite, I mean, if you can, what is one of your favorite Dutch phrases?
My favorite Dutch phrases. Well, I used one this weekend after I had a live offline day with my students, and I texted my sister and I said, I felt like a fish in the water. So, meaning, I don't know, do you have this in English?
Fish out of water.
Out of water, no. Fish in het water, like a fish in the water. It means like I felt really in my place, like at where I need to be. I felt very comfortable and very joyful. So really love that one. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I hear them all the time in English. So my kids will say the Dutch phrase in English. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. It's very visual. It tends to be very visual. One last question about this. Why hand shoes? Help
hand
me.
shoes.
Yeah.
Why not?
Handschoenen.
Yeah. You got feet shoes and hand shoes. Yeah.
No one can explain it because we have silly things in English too, but I always like to ask about it because we joke about it all the time with my kids about hand shoes.
You know the word for jeans also?
No, tell me.
It's spijkerbroek, like nail pants, where you hammer with a nail pants. Yeah.
That you've taught me something new today. Thank you. You've given me a word. Very, very fun. Okay, so how do people get? So I like that you've developed the framework. You have a community for parents to practice. And does that community, I can imagine, at least for me, that community then sometimes turns into friendships. Not that you can promise that, but it is a rather intimate thing to learn a language with a group. Yeah. And so have you seen that with your classes, that people sometimes make really great connections?
Yeah, definitely. People just tend to click or come together or join for a coffee to chat a little bit more and share experiences. And yeah, it's really beautiful to see like people getting to know each other better and also finding common ground where they can build a friendship. Yeah, definitely. And me too. Sometimes with my students, I connect with them because I really have the best students.
That's it's invaluable to meet other people on the same stage as you, especially when moving countries. So I think what you're doing is really, just beautiful and important. So how can people connect with you if they want to learn more about Mama Dutch or any of your other offerings? Tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, so I'm usually very active on Instagram. So you can find me there at mariska.mamadutch. I also have a podcast channel with regular short lessons or short stories in Dutch. You can find me there on Mama Dutch, Speak Dutch with Confidence. And I'm also going to be starting a membership this year, which is not online yet, but it's in the making. And that's not only for parents or people with children who are going to school, but for everyone just wanting to update their Dutch a bit and get into my energy, my community. So that's also coming soon. And then there's the website, www.mamadutch.nl.
Okay. And those the classes are online and in person or just online?
For the Dutch for Moms course, it's all online.
Online. Yeah. Okay. So they can be anywhere. And then the classes are normally how many people usually join, or does it matter? Do you cap it?
No, not really. Not for the Dutch for Moms course, not yet. I have, in the last group, we had 25 women. And we're starting tomorrow with, we're now recording in February, but we're starting tomorrow with a new group. So let's see. But I also do conversation courses, and they are capped at eight people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. All right. We'll put everything in the show notes. If you want to contact Mariska, thank you so much for joining me and answering all my strange language questions. I appreciate it.
I loved it. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. We'll see you soon.
Yes. Bye-bye. Doei.
Doei.
Okay. That's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed our show. For the latest insights on living internationally, join us at houseofperegrine.com to find out how you can connect with our community. Let's craft our life story with intention together.